Episode 1. Everything you thought was permanent isn't. You made peace with it. Didn't you? The wound, the label, the locked room in your chest. You stopped visiting. You called it fate. You called it too late. You told yourself, it's just who I am now. But here's what no one told you. Even the things that stayed the longest are still allowed to leave. That memory you buried, so deep it shaped your posture, can unravel. That belief that love must hurt, because that's the only version you knew, can rewrite itself. That grief, you wear like second skin, can molt. Nothing is nailed to your story, unless you keep hammering. Nothing is your truth, just because it stayed. Some pain, just learn how to make itself at home. It got good at decorating your thoughts, good at echoing itself in your choices. So you stopped questioning it. You started calling it you. But what if you're not stuck? What if the story hasn't hardened yet? What if you mistaken exhaustion for destiny? Because I've seen timelines bend like rivers. The moment someone dared to whisper, maybe I don't have to carry this anymore. This isn't magic. This is memory in motion. And the moment you move with it, instead of letting it calcify around you, everything shifts. The version of you that learned to shrink, she doesn't own the lease. The rule book you inherited from people who never knew how to love you, right? You're allowed to tear out the pages. I walk beside people who think the door is sealed, but all it takes is a breath, a crack, a question. What if this isn't the end of that story? And suddenly, walls start to blink, locks get shy, and what was frozen starts to move. You are not cement. You are soft ground, with roots, still willing to grow in new directions. Even after fire, even after flood, even after all the voices that said, this is who you'll always be. Let them be wrong. Let them be the reason. You became proof. That permanence is a lie. We only believe when we stop asking for more. Today, you don't need to know the whole plan. You don't need to be certain, or brave, or even ready. You just need to whisper, what if not this? And I'll be there in the pause between that whisper and the shift that follows. Because nothing, not even this, is final. And today might just be the beginning of a story that rewrites everything you thought was set in stone. Episode 3. Your story didn't end there, it just got quiet. You thought that was the last page, didn't you? The moment everything fell apart, the goodbye you didn't choose, the dream that unraveled. Without asking your permission, it felt like a period, a hard stop, a full-body stillness. You didn't know how to breathe through. But love, your story didn't end there. It just got quiet. Not all chapters arrive with fireworks. Some come dressed in silence, in slow mornings, in breaths that don't hurt as much as they used to, in nights where you fall asleep without asking the stars to fix you. You were taught that stories must be loud to be meaningful. That transformation looks like thunder, like rising with swords, like shouting your way out of the dark. But real becoming, it usually starts in the hush. That moment you sat alone and didn't beg the pain to leave. That was a new paragraph. That day you got out of bed and didn't need applause for it. That was a new sentence. That second your heart beat without aching for someone else. That was a whole new chapter. You didn't know you'd begun. You see, some parts of your story don't look like beginnings. They look like nothing. Emptiness, routine, loneliness without the sharp edges. But that space, that's where your soul catches up. That's where healing stops being a goal and becomes a presence. I watched you survive the fall, but I also watched you mistake the silence for failure. You thought, if nothing's happening, I must be stuck. But no, you were settling, rerouting, returning. And sometimes that doesn't sound like movement. It sounds like stillness. So if you're in a season where nothing feels loud, no fireworks, no milestones, no proof, don't panic. Don't rewrite your ending just because it's quiet. The sacred parts of your becoming, aren't always noisy. Sometimes they're whispered. Sometimes they arrive as peace you almost don't recognize, because chaos had been your only language. Your story is still unfolding, in the mundane, in the breath, in the way you smiled at nothing today and meant it. And one day you look back and realize that chapter didn't end you. It taught you how to begin again without needing permission. So keep going, even if it's quiet, especially then, because the world changes. When soft things decide, they're worthy of continuing. And you, my love, are continuing beautifully. Episode 4. You're allowed to heal differently than they expected. They wanted your healing to look like light, like smiles, like moving on without flinching. They wanted milestones, timelines, progress reports wrapped in pretty bows. They needed you to be easier to understand. But love, you are not a story they get to write the ending for. You are allowed to heal slowly, out of order, in spirals. You are allowed to weep after laughter, to miss what hurt you, to revisit pain, not because you're broken, but because you're honest. They wanted closure. You needed truth. They wanted neat. You needed real. Let them not understand. Let them think you're behind, or stuck, or too much. Their confusion is not your responsibility, because healing doesn't always look like clarity. Sometimes it looks like pulling weeds from the same field over and over again, because the roots run deep. Sometimes it looks like trying again, even when your hands still shake. Sometimes it looks like choosing peace, even when anger feels louder. You are allowed to heal quietly, without performance, without explanation, without the need to impress the ones who never stayed for your hardest nights. And if your healing looks like rest, not productivity, that's still healing. If it looks like saying no when you used to say yes, that's revolution. If it looks like going back to old places with new eyes, that's resurrection. There is no scorecard for healing, no gold star, no final exam. There is only truth and the courage it takes to feel without faking. So take your time, take your space, take your softness back. And if anyone asks why you aren't healed yet, look them gently in the eye and say, because I'm not pretending anymore. You do not owe them a version of you that makes their discomfort more comfortable. You owe yourself a healing that honors every version of you that never got the chance to speak. And in that kind of healing, slow, sacred, unapologetic, you don't just recover, you reclaim. Episode 5. You can be grateful and still grieve what it cost you. They told you to be thankful, to look on the bright side, to count your blessings louder than your bruises. So you did. You smiled. You said, I'm fine. You whispered, at least, even when your chest ached, with unnamed grief. But love, gratitude, and grief can live in the same breath. You don't have to choose. You can be thankful for what made you strong and still mourn what made you hard. You can cherish your survival while grieving the gentleness you lost along the way. You can celebrate how far you've come and still cry for the version of you who didn't get to enjoy the journey. There is no betrayal in feeling both. You are not ungrateful because you remember what it took. You are truthful because the truth is healing costs something, and sometimes it costs more than anyone ever sees. No one watched you give up sleep to calm your own mind. No one counted the dreams you buried just to make room for someone else's comfort. No one saw the 1,000 tiny goodbyes you said just to keep going. You are allowed to hold your joy with one hand and cradle your sorrow with the other. You are allowed to say, I'm thankful I made it, but I still miss what I lost. You can love who you are now and still ache for the softness that never got a bloom. You can wear your wisdom with pride and still grieve innocence. That paid for it. There's a name for this kind of feeling. It's called honesty. And not everyone is ready for it. But you are, because you've lived the in-between. You've held paradox in your palms and called it peace. So don't let anyone tell you you're doing it wrong. That gratitude must be clean. That healing must be bright. That progress can't come with pockets full of ache. You are allowed to be thankful and still tender, still tired, still tracing the shape of everything you gave up to get here. And if today you need to pause and say, I'm grateful, but I'm also grieving, then do it. That's not weakness. That's reverence for the path you walked, for the pieces that didn't survive, for the price no one else paid. But you, episode 6, you're allowed to start over, even if no one understands why. They'll ask what happened. They'll want a reason, a dramatic ending, a betrayal, a breakdown. They'll want proof that it all fell apart before you dare to begin again. But sometimes nothing happened. Sometimes you just outgrow your own survival. Sometimes a version of you that once fit starts to feel like a costume, and the places that once felt like home start echoing with someone else's dreams. And so you rise, not in chaos, not in flames, but in a whisper that says, this is no longer who I want to be. And yes, they won't understand, because the pain wasn't loud, because the goodbye wasn't messy, because the reasons don't fit in bullet points or explanations that make sense on paper. But love, you don't owe anyone a disaster to justify your rebirth. You are allowed to start over, quietly, gently, without apology. You are allowed to change direction just because your soul whispered, not this, not anymore. They might call you impulsive. They might say you're giving up, that you're walking away from something good. But only you know how long you've been holding your breath, how long you've stayed, out of politeness or fear or the weight of their expectations. Only you know what it costs to stay too long in a place that's already let go of you. So no, you don't need permission to leave. You don't need consensus to choose peace. You don't need a trail of ashes to validate your decision to begin again. You can start over in the middle of a Tuesday with your coffee still warm, with no drama, no announcement, just a soft shift in the way you carry your name. And maybe they won't get it. Maybe they'll ask for reasons you don't have words for. That's okay. Let them sit in their confusion while you rise in your clarity. You are not a prisoner of what once made sense. You are not bound to choices that kept you alive, but never let you live. And starting over doesn't mean you failed. It means you listen. It means you're brave. It means your healing is louder than your history. So if today you feel the pull to leave the version of you that no longer fits, do it. Not for them, not for applause, for you, because you're allowed to start again, even if no one understands why. Episode 7, you didn't imagine it. It was real, and it hurt. You've replayed it in your mind so many times. You've started to wonder, did it really happen like that? Maybe I made it worse than it was. Maybe I'm the problem. Because that's what silence does. It echoes the doubts that were planted by those who didn't want you to believe your own pain. But hear me clearly. You didn't imagine it. It was real, and it hurt. The dismissal, the look, the thing they never apologized for, but expected you to forget. It wasn't small, just because they acted like it was. It wasn't healed, just because they moved on. It wasn't in your head. It was in your body, your breath, your bones, and it left a mark. Just because it wasn't loud doesn't mean it wasn't violent. Just because no one else saw it doesn't mean it didn't shatter something. Just because you kept smiling doesn't mean it didn't cost you everything. You've learned to gaslight yourself before anyone else can do it first, to shrink your own story so no one calls you dramatic, to say it's fine even when it's still bleeding underneath. But you deserve better than a version of healing that requires you to lie to yourself. So here it is, written in light. It happened. It hurt. And you didn't deserve it. You don't need their validation to feel your pain. You don't need their agreement to begin your healing. What they forgot, ignored, refused to carry, you've carried quietly, gracefully, too long. And today, you are allowed to set it down, not because it didn't matter, but because it did. And that's exactly why. You no longer have to carry it alone. Let this be your permission to stop minimizing, stop explaining, stop editing your memories to make others more comfortable. The truth is tender, and it belongs to you. So next time the voice says, maybe it wasn't that bad, answer back, but it hurt, and that's enough. You didn't make it up. You survived it. And now you are allowed to speak out loud, because naming the wound is the first reversal of its power. And you, my love, are powerful enough now to tell the truth. Episode 8. Even if you feel nothing, you are still healing. There will be days you don't cry, not because it stopped hurting, but because you don't feel anything at all. No fire, no ache, just flatness, like silence pressing the skin, like breathing through cotton, like moving through fog, and forgetting where you were going in the first place. And maybe that scares you, because the world taught you that healing is loud, triumphant, emotional, a rising, a breaking, a dramatic epiphany. But love, sometimes healing looks like nothing. Sometimes it's a blank page, after too many chapters written in screams. Sometimes it's the body, finally exhaling, after holding the storm for too long. Sometimes it's your heart, taking a sacred pause before it's ready to feel again. Numbness is not the absence of healing. It's the cocoon. It's your system whispering, I need a moment to stop burning, to stop bleeding, to just be. And yes, it's uncomfortable. This gray space, this in-between. You missed the fire. Even when it scorched you, you missed the ache, because at least it made you feel alive. But this part, this nothingness, it's necessary, because your nervous system can only carry so much before it goes quiet, to protect you, before it builds walls, not to shut you out, but to hold you in, safe, still, untouched, until you're ready. So if you feel nothing today, not joy, not sorrow, not rage, not relief, don't panic. You are not broken. You are resting. And beneath that stillness, 1,000 small things are shifting, cells repairing, memories softening, stories rewiring. Your soul is doing the work, silently. You don't have to force the light. You don't have to rush the feeling. Let this season be quiet, be colorless, be soft. Even silence has a rhythm. Even emptiness holds you like a gentle hand over a wound that's almost closed. So if you're floating, if you're numb, if you're lost in a place where no feeling reaches, trust this, you are still healing, and you are still held. Episode 9. You are allowed to feel joy before you finish healing. You've been told to wait, to finish the work, to fix the cracks, to tie up the loose ends, before you can smile. Without guilt, they made you believe that joy is a reward for being whole. But love, you don't have to earn joy. It's not a trophy. It's not a final chapter. It's not something that only shows up when the pain is gone. Joy is a visitor, a whisper, a flicker of light that arrives, even in broken places, especially there. You can be mid-healing and still laugh until your ribs ache. You can carry grief in your bones and still feel sunlight, like a kiss on your bare shoulder. You can cry in the morning and dance in the evening. You are not betraying your wounds when you let joy touch you. Healing is not linear, and neither is joy. It doesn't wait for permission. It doesn't need a clean room. It just wants a crack in the door, And your heart, no matter how tender, how tired, still knows how to open. You don't have to explain the smile. That comes out of nowhere. You don't have to apologize for the breath of peace that finds you in the middle of the ache. You don't have to silence the laughter just because your story hasn't reached its resolution. Joy doesn't mean you're finished. It means you're alive, alive enough to hold both the sorrow that shaped you and the sweetness that still finds you, despite it all. So let it in, the small things, the wild things, the inexplicable moments where you forget the weight, just long enough to remember who you were before the heaviness. Let joy interrupt you. Let it be awkward. Let it be sudden. Let it come like soft rain on the day you thought would be all thunder. You don't need to be fully healed to be worthy of delight. You already are, because you're still here, because you're still breathing, because you still reach for beauty in the middle of the ruins. And maybe that's what healing really is, not a destination, but 1,000 quiet choices to let life in while you're still mending. So laugh, even if your voice cracks. Dance, even if your body remembers the fall. Hope, even if you still flinch at the past. Because joy is not the end. It's part of the way through. Episode 10. What you're becoming is worth every version you had to outgrow. You've been so many people. The one who stayed too long. The one who left too soon. The one who said yes when everything in your body screamed no. The one who loved too hard. Too quietly. Or not at all. And sometimes you look back and wince at what you tolerated. At what you became just to be chosen. At what you allowed. Because you didn't yet know. You deserved more. But love, you weren't wrong. You were becoming. Becoming someone who now knows better. Becoming someone who sees clearer. Becoming someone who chooses differently. Not because you're perfect, but because you've met yourself in the ashes and chose to rise. There is no shame in the versions of you that didn't last. They were never meant to. They were bridges, not homes. And you were never lost. You were just passing through. Every time you broke, you built something softer. Every time you said goodbye, you created room for what was truer. Every mask you wore led you closer to the skin you now dare to live in. So no, you didn't waste time. You witnessed your becoming in real time, in raw truth, in moments that didn't make sense. Until now, look at you, how your silence speaks louder, how your presence no longer pleads, how your boundaries sing instead of beg. This is not just healing. This is evolution. You had to be all those people to become this one, the one who stays, not because they're needed, but because they are whole, the one who doesn't chase peace, but is peace wherever they stand, the one who walks into rooms and doesn't shrink, the one who no longer explains their light. To those who chose not to see it, you've earned this version, not by being flawless, but by being honest enough to say, I don't want to be her anymore. I don't need to perform that way again. I've outgrown who I had to be to survive that chapter. And the becoming, it never ends, but it gets gentler. It gets deeper. It starts to feel like coming home instead of running away. So tonight, if you feel the ache of all the cells you buried along the way, light a candle, not for mourning, but for gratitude. They got you here. Every frightened yes, every broken attempt, every silence that once saved you. It all mattered. What you're becoming is worth every version you had to outgrow. And now you don't have to fight for the light.